Boom. That's it. We're on.
We're on. We're live.
Hey everyone, we're back again.
Hey.
You see, Chris has changed quite a bit since you last saw him.
So far less beard. No, actually, this is not Chris. This is Uldis, and I'm here in Oslo. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. So we talked about how we're doing a hackathon now, and we want to like kind of make it a social event like towards the end of the year, and we're bringing in all our partners as best as we can. And Uldis was gracious enough to give us his time. Come over here
totally. Had to get up at 5 a.m. this morning, so I'm only running on coffee at this point, but we'll manage.
Yeah, God, tell me about it. So yeah, as we've said in the past, we want these Tuesday streams to be more like educational, sort of topical. And now that we're done teaching Chris the fundamentals of UX markup, we were looking for a different kind of topic that the community is interested in, and that's also just interesting in terms of what Fuse can do. And I think we landed pretty quickly that layout animation was...
that's perhaps mostly because I constantly get questions on the community in forums and also on Slack where people want to do things, just random arbitrary things, and they don't know how. And quite frequently the answer is layout animation. So when a layout of something changes, then the layout animation kicks in. So it's more about use cases than the tool itself.
Yeah, I guess we can start by looking at some of the examples we have up right now that actually uses this feature. So you're gonna have a quick look at my switcher when I'm doing this. There we go. So yeah, when we talk about layout animation, just to be explicit, it's not just like a scroll view with a bunch of things in it that scrolls when you touch it. It's more like the actual changing of the layout and the relative positions of things within a layout. When we mean layout, we do mean things that are positioned relatively to one another.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at this one, this is one of my favorite examples personally, and you can see it's doing this sort of morph between these different kinds of layout, right? Like we have this list layout and then it changes into this other like sort of page layout, but we're not really doing like a sort of a traditional like page transition, right? Like we're taking the existing content and then changing it to fit a different purpose. And when you see stuff like this, like I was an Android developer for a long time, this was not fun to do. Like it was like this kind of thing, like if someone shows you a video, this is what I want it to look like. This was not it's not something I would look forward to.
But isn't it at this point it's something like the material transition?
Sure, it's actually we actually have an example of exactly that, right? See if I can go down a little further. Like this guy.
Yeah.
It's a perfect example of this, right? So this is more and more becoming a requirement almost of how you're going to do your layouts. Like the traditional sort of page transitions is one thing, but like having a page that's capable of displaying things in different ways is what this is intended to do, right? And it's actually not super complicated to do with Fuse at all. Well, it's arguably, I would say, not very complicated.
Well, I think it takes pretty much only understanding why and when a layout animation kicks in. Yeah. Also, I guess we can just start looking at some code and we'll just see what we can do real quick. So I prepared a little bit of stuff here that's currently off screen. We just have this simple project here. I made we'll just look at it. I called it simple, I think that was what I called it anyway. Yeah, simple layout animation. So let's start with a simple layout animation.
Yeah, so here's the thing we're doing. And right now we're not doing very much, obviously. We have a circle that's aligned to the center of our screen, and we have a button that currently doesn't do anything, and the circle is aligned to the center, right?
Okay.
And we can obviously add a change animator to this button to change properties on the circle, right? So let's go into our button. We'll make a while press. And we'll say, I want to change the alignment of the circle. Circle.alignment to left, like this. Right?
Okay, so while the button is pressed, the circle will get aligned to the left side. Okay,
yes,
but that's an instant change, and as soon as you release the button, the circle goes back to its rest state.
Totally. So you can imagine different kinds of ways of animating. Like, say if I wanted the circle to animate to the left, like if you don't know about layout animation, you probably think like, how would I like change on a translation inside the circle, and I would make that, you'll do all this like complicated math.
But then again, you kind of have to change it over some period of time, right? Well, so that's another dimension.
There's like there are ways to kind of alter the positions of things, but notice again we change the alignment of the circle, right? And that's a relative thing. That's relative to where that circle has been positioned. The nice thing about Fuse and is that animating this sort of transition from one layout to another is basically trivial. So inside of our circle, we'll make a layout animation. And if you watched the stream I did with Chris, we talked about like entering animation and exiting animation. So these are like triggers, but they have sort of like an implicit timeline of their own.
So when an item is added to the scene inside of its parent, the adding animation is played.
Yes.
Entering animation is played for the page when it enters, and so on.
Yeah. So it's essentially it's a thing that happens because an animation has to occur. Yeah. Right. Or is it intended to occur.
And that's the same case with layout animation, except that it happens at a different
layout. Yes. So when the layout changes, we either don't animate the layout or we animate the layout. And in this case, we do by adding this layout animation node. And in here, we can start adding some specific kinds of animators. Like in this case, we're going to be moving the circle, right? So I could use the move animator, and the move animator it's almost like worthy of a video of its own in a lot of ways. But just to be easy on this, we'll just say I want to move the circle an entire unit, as in like all the way to the end of its extreme, right? And that extreme is relative to the position change, right?
So it's going to move on the x-axis by a full length of position change.
Yes, exactly. So we can experiment with what x is just for a moment. So right now there's no duration on this, right?
Yeah.
So this is still instant.
Yeah.
But if I change this x to 0.5, well, ideally, if I save the button correctly, I guess that doesn't work with layout animation. Never mind. Then instead, I want to do this over duration. Let's try that. There we go.
So yeah, so when you press the button, it takes a whole second for the circle to animate to the left side.
I'm actually, if anyone from our team is watching this, like I'm really curious as to why I can't do 0.5 on the X here. Because I figured that would be totally. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just. Oh, it's in reverse. Never mind. I'm just a silly person. So it starts at 0.5 and then moves back out. So this is not great. You should use 1.
Yeah.
Stick with 1. That's the lesson learned today.
But that has to do with the position change.
Yes,
thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
So now again, I'm pressing the thing. I'm really just changing the alignment, right? Change the alignment to left. The layout engine looks at that and says, okay, this is a position change. So that is going to, well, is there a layout animation that has to take place? And it looks at that layout animation timeline and it completes it over 1 second. And it acts pretty much as you would expect. Like I press and I release halfway, and it just returns, right?
Yeah, as any other animation, almost any other animation in Fuse, it plays forward and then back the same animation.
Yeah.
So again, if you wanted, you could give it a different duration back.
Oh,
right?
For sure. Should you set the duration back to maybe 0.2, like something short?
So yeah, perhaps make the duration longer, maybe a second, so that should show the difference.
0.5, save that up. Huh. Maybe there are special rules to this. I actually think we should not be messing around with the durations on this thing too much right now.
Okay.
This is surprising to me, but you know, there's always something new. The thing about Fuse sometimes is there's a lot of stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, well, here Mortar is actually suggesting several things. So one is, first he said it should work, try forcing a refresh. Yeah. Then he said, no, it doesn't work that way for layout animation. There is no front back on them.
Okay, well.
On layout animations, there's no front and back on them.
Good to know,
and,
good to know.
Every layout change is a complete new layout change.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So okay, well, my ideas of anarchy have been dashed. Anyway, I think this, you can already see the power here, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, we simply change the alignment of a thing, and the animation engine knows how to make that, you know, how to animate those properties, any properties needed to make that happen.
That's pretty cool.
I think one of the cooler things you might be able to do here, I mean, this is all silly stuff, but if I say I align this thing to the right, it just animates over. And I'll set the easing on this to bounce in, like yay. Now it bounces that way, and it bounces back the other way.
And now we get a nice bouncing ball.
It's super fun stuff. I mean, just being able to do this quickly. I mean, I don't know what the purpose of a bouncing ball is in your UI, but it's still really fun to be able to, you know, reach this goal with so little code, right?
Yeah, well, you know, the bouncing ball could kick off some other animation when it hits the bottom or something.
Sure, could totally do that. But I think for the time being, this really illustrates the fundamentals of layout animation, right? It's like you're changing layout properties, and you have animation that allows you to animate that change.
Yeah. Got it.
We can do a second sort of example here as well. So we have the move. We also have resize. So if I say I want to change the circle height, I guess I have to change both of these properties, but I'll just mess around with it to be 80%. See if that actually does it. Yep. Up. I gotta change them both. 80 like that. Boom. Right.
Okay. Now that's a big circle, and again that happens instantly.
Yes. So all I really have to do here to make that animate is use resize. And I want to resize on both axes here, right? So I would say I would resize on the x-axis and the y-axis, or I can do shorthand for both of these, which is just say vector.
Yeah.
And vector is like a comma-separated list, right? So if I set 1, it's going to make every field of that vector 1.
Okay.
Same as with colors, right?
Yeah.
So if I say this is going to resize relative to the layout change, and we're going to do that over a duration of 0.2 seconds, like that. And wait, oh, this is the timeline problem. Sorry, it's I got to make these the same length.
No, I think it's not. I think this actually makes a lot of sense. So what you're saying there is that while pressed, you change the alignment, which affects the position. Then you change the height and width, which affects the dimensions of the bounding box for the circle. And that bounding box is transformed from the top left corner. So perhaps you need to set some transform origin.
I can't remember if it was center
anchor
left. Yeah, that's probably the right way to do it as well. So you mean just like transform origin to be center, for instance? No, that didn't do it either. There are rules to this that I clearly I'm not familiar enough with. But anyway, you still get the idea. I guess the alignment is actually more the problem here, because it happens instantly.
Mortar suggests using alignment center left.
Yeah. Center left, and also the alignment here to be center right. And that's still, I'll just poke at it. Still doesn't quite do it.
Yeah, I think it has to do with the anchor.
Yeah, it doesn't actually matter. The point has been actually explained so far. Being able to we only change these properties of the thing, which alters the layout, and then we have this animation or this animator that can interpolate those changes.
Okay,
right?
So alignment, it's clear. It affects the position. Width and height affects the dimensions. So we have move and resize to react on those. Are there any other triggers that could be put inside of a layout animation?
I'm not sure actually. I only ever used resize and move.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm wondering.
No, I mean these are primarily the ones you care about, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So can layout change in any other way?
Well, you can have
dimensions or position.
I guess there's like,
I guess that's pretty much the two most popular use cases.
It's the ones I've been using. But we're going to be using like layout animation in addition to a couple of other triggers as well. we're going to be looking at what happens when something is added to the screen and when something is removed to the screen, and we're going to see how the sequence of those events makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a second sort of prepared example here.
Before you go there,
Okay.
Another note from Mortore, he says that we could use scale instead of resizing. Yeah, I guess.
Okay. So scale by a factor of 1 relative to, is that how it works? Yeah. So relative to, is it still layout change, or is it some other? We'll find out real quick, won't we?
Because the resize animates the actual layout, and scale does a transform.
Huh. Relative to doesn't seem to be the same sort of.
So.
That's interesting.
Well, I don't know. Perhaps the scale should go inside of while pressed.
This is already something we don't want to do. Like resize and move are the two things you typically want to do. I think the problem here is that we're messing with the alignment and how that actually
that could be it.
interferes with this.
Yeah.
Let's not get lost in the weeds here.
Okay.
Let's move on to something that's a more like a common use case, an actual scenario where you might actually want to use this. So, is that animated list? Let's see. Or list animation. Man. Yeah, my memory is not great today.
So that's list animation.
Right. So
there's no list.
We have no list here. So if you look at this UX real brief, like what it actually does. So we have a row of buttons at the end here that just like gonna add stuff to the top of our list. We're gonna add stuff at a random position in our list. We're gonna add stuff to the bottom of our list.
Okay.
And we have the classic sort of scroll view with a stack panel within each, and for each of the items in the list, we're gonna create one of our list items, which is this class right here. And right now it doesn't quite do anything. So if I just hit top a bunch of times, see, so it's like adding all these numbered items, right?
Okay, so all you do is have an observable list of things, and then when you click
the JavaScript here is very, very straightforward. It's like when I click on these guys, I'm going to remove the item that was clicked, and I have the ability to insert at position 0, which is like add to the top of the list. I'm going to add to the end of the list, or I'm going to insert at a random position. This is the JavaScript here is not important, right? The important thing though is that we're actually exposing this as an observable, not just an array, right?
Yeah.
And of course you want to do this because you want to observe changes to the list as well, but it also means this observable has like knowledge about like how it was changed, and Fuse also has like can use this knowledge to like inform how animations are played out, right?
Okay. So
if we just hide this JavaScript for now, and we look at each list item. So when I'm adding a list item, right, like what if I want to, like, okay, let's hit this random button. Bam, 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 bam. I am now adding random items somewhere in this list, but I can't really see which one was just added without like paying attention to the index being incremented, right?
Yeah.
What we can do is add an adding animation, and I'll use a change over opacity, and I'll start at 0.8 or something, right? And I'll play that over a duration of 0.2 seconds. Now when I hit random stuff, that's not actually obvious enough. Let's change color instead. Make it like a nice dark color for a few seconds, like that.
Okay.
So now you can like hopefully see on the stream. I'll make this a little bit slower as well in case the frame rate's not so great. Every time I add an item now, that item is added with this background color of 333, and it's going to animate up to its sort of default color, right?
So since the adding animation is played backwards, it starts at the 333 color and animates back to that E0 something.
Exactly.
Over a duration of half a second. Yeah.
So I mean, this already there's some value to this, right?
Yeah.
We can also use the inverse of this called the removing animation. And this one's where stuff gets really kind of interesting, I think, because this animator also informs Fuse of when the item is actually like removed, right? So if I add a bunch of items here and I click one, it completes its removing animation, and then it's removed from the list.
Okay, so it only gets removed from the list physically when the animation is done.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So this allows us to do some pretty fun stuff, especially using the move animator. So let's say instead of changing the color like this, I want to have every item kind of like fly in from the left when they're added, and when they remove it, I want them to fly out to the right. So when we're adding, we're going to start far to the left, so -1 relative to the parent size, in this case the entire screen that we're looking at. I'm going to do that over a shorter duration, like 0.2. Save this guy. You can see it's adding these items, right?
Yeah, so those are actually flying in from the left again because the adding animation is a backwards animation.
Yes, so with this, when we say backwards, what we mean
so it starts at -1.
Yes,
to the left.
Yeah, you're specifying the extreme of the animation, essentially, in that direction. And then we can take that same animation and just apply it in the other direction. And now, when we're adding stuff, removing stuff, it flies out to the right.
Yeah, perhaps make it a bit slower.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same. 0.5. That flies out like that, flies out like that. It's pretty fun. You can have some easing.
That looks nice.
I guess for the adding back in would be good. Yeah, so it like kind of bounces in like that, right? That's fun stuff. But when they remove, I just want them to go away. Maybe a little quicker.
Yeah, but now we actually can immediately see the problem with this. When the removing animation plays, the rest of the items simply jump up because that old item was just removed from the layout completely, so the rest of the items need to snap into place.
I mean, even though the item hasn't animated in yet, its actual position in the layout has already been kind of taken, right?
So they instantly move down, and when something is removed, they instantly move up.
Yeah. So I add one to the top here. It pops them down, and then it comes in, right?
Yeah.
Which maybe that's fine. Maybe that's something you want. But we can make that using layout animation like we looked at earlier. We can just pair all this stuff together to make this list kind of move in a more interesting way, right? So we have our adding animation, we have our removing animation, and we're going to add a layout animation again, where we're going to use another move animator. But we're going to move only on, well, we can move on any axis really if we don't have to constrain ourselves. It's going to be relative to the position change, right? Over a duration of, I guess, 0.5 is fine as well.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to keep the durations similar.
So now stuff gets pushed out of the way, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing happens when we remove stuff.
Well, this is beautiful.
Very slow.
Yeah. Perhaps the layout animation should be faster.
Yeah. I mean, this all becomes a design problem, right? So it's like, did I just use the wrong direction again? Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Can remove each item. And now we have the world's slowest list to interact with. But it's very, very easy, to get at this sort of result using layout animation, adding animation, removing animation. It's like to get a nicely animated list is very, very easy in this way. Just add a bunch of items here.
So when we're adding random items in the middle, on which elements the layout animation kicks in?
Well, in this case, as long as I add stuff to the top, everything else has to move out of the way. If I add stuff to the bottom, nothing has to move out of the way.
Yeah.
If I add any place in the random in the middle, of course, everything beneath that has to move out of the way, right? Because we're extending the bounding box of this layout like vertically. So pretty, I think like in terms of like just adding this to go from this to this.
And I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's looking much better in terms of animation, and it's not that bad. Take a look at that. All you essentially have there is 3 animation triggers, and inside of those, it's pretty much the same thing. It's just a move.
Yeah, like we only care about the movement of the thing. Essentially, of course, we could do more things here. Like we could say that maybe each of these items like will wind up being bigger, like vertically. So let's just say the default height of this panel is like make it some 120 points or whatever. So this is like the actual size that we want each item to start at. But we could say that when we're moving, we could resize by the vector of 1. Relative to the layout change. And let's see now, when I add stuff, it flies out in like the same size it is, right?
Yeah.
But when, wrong order, sorry about that. I'm actually curious about how I would time this out. I guess I could just say the delay of this would be 0.5, right? Or is it the other way around when you do layout animations?
No, you have to delay the move.
Yeah, exactly. Hang on. It's in reverse though. So right now, of course, we're not actually resizing anything, right? We're not actually doing anything to this.
So how can you make it resize?
Well, I guess instead of using the vector 1 relative to layout change, maybe this is a silly idea.
But no layout is being changed in the sense of size, is it?
Yeah, we need a way to set the height, essentially, right? That's the problem.
Yeah, Mortray suggests simply removing the relative too.
Yeah.
So I read that as resizing.
Well, I'm always getting confused about the which order,
Yeah,
like...
remove the delay. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Still not doing it right, though. Oh well. Sometimes it's just not gonna help.
Well, let's just skip that then.
Yeah. Clearly, I'm ill-prepared today.
I guess the list is looking pretty nice,
Yeah.
and we have covered the basic cases of adding things, removing them, and then how the rest of the items in the list are reacting to those changes.
Yeah, that pretty much covers like the basic thing, right? Like I guess the problem here is that these are responding to things; they're not actually setting properties. So I was just thinking, I was being a silly boy. That's what was actually happening. I guess those are like the two like big early ones. You can start with the basics of like I'm changing this property and I want the change to be manifested in an animated way. The other is how you can like see how adding things to the visual tree and how the layout properties of that visual tree changes when things are added, and how you can sort of chain these things together to make an interesting looking sort of behavior. And the last one we're going to look at is how to do sort of the morphing layout stuff that we looked at earlier.
Now we're getting somewhere interesting.
This is actually one of the easier ones to do. It's just a slight sort of mind F sometimes when you're looking at the source. So let's look at that. It's LayoutMaster animation is what we're looking at. So what is this? Right now it's not really doing an awful lot. It's like a similar layout to the one we had earlier. We have some rectangles here with different sizes. We have an image here that's been laid out according to, well, it's in a dock panel, so it's going to fill the dock panel after we've consumed this and that. And we have some buttons that currently don't do anything.
Okay, so that's essentially at the top there we have a grid. At the bottom we also have a grid, and all there is to it, some rectangles with the random sizes on them. Yeah, and
you'll notice like the image is placed at the top here, and that's for a reason that I'll show shortly. I mean, the order here actually matters. So if we're looking at our rectangles, I've given them all names. We have our top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right. And we have buttons with a similar label, so you can probably tell we're going to do something in relation to these, right?
Yeah.
So if we'll just look at this top left button, and this is like a magic trick. So I'm just going to say, I guess tapped, I guess we'll use set for once. Never use set. We're going to use it now for illustration purposes. So we're going to change image layout master to top left. I'll save that. I hit TL. Whoop. What happens?
Bam, the image jumped from the place where it was to that rectangle.
Yeah, it's now essentially being slaved to the layout that rectangle defines, right? It's essentially like just looking at the layout that rectangle has, and it's taking it for its own, right?
So basically what you did was you took the image out of the dock panel in a way and put it inside of that top left rectangle.
Yeah, so I mean, just to kind of show here, if we do a change and stick that in a while pressed instead, save this guy, refresh, and now when I let go, it pops back to its original position. So in this case, we're temporarily changing its layout master, like the thing that owns its layouts, and then we're changing back to not having a layout master, therefore being defined, having its layout given by the dock panel.
No, about the layout master, what is the thing that the image in this case actually inherits?
Well, the layout, like position, right? The position and the size, like the bounding box.
Position and size. So
but I'm actually, you know, it's we can mess around with this stuff, which is what we're doing here. So I guess we'll take our top rectangle. I just wonder if this actually works. So if we put a rotation on it by a degrees of 45. So this guy's always up there, and we hit this guy, and it, okay, so it's only the position and size, so it does not inherit its, like, any transforms that are placed on it.
Okay, gotcha.
Right.
So it's it basically puts the image inside of the parent's bounding box.
Yes. Though rotation happens post fact, so maybe I do a is it transform with a rotate inside of it? It's been a long time since I did this. So with a rotation.
Oh, we're now venturing into unknown territory.
Yeah, I doubt this is it. Yeah, maybe you don't need the transform anymore. Right. So see if that works. Okay, that's not it. Never mind. Doesn't matter. That's not really a good use case anyway. But we can take this tapped and just like repeat that a bunch of times. By the way, Emil here's nickname is tapped on our work Slack. Every time I say tapped, it's like,
Emil, come in.
Yeah. BL and BR. And now we have our image kind of hopping between these positions.
Okay, that's very interesting. So,
right?
Another thing that we notice is that the image kind of fills in whatever the parent available the visible area of the parent is.
Yeah, that's right? Because of the stretch mode.
And that's
right?
because of the stretch mode. If
so
we use the different stretch mode,
yeah, or no stretch mode, like in this case, it's going to just, you know, try and fill the bounding box like it would in any other sort of layout. So I guess a helpful metaphor would be like, it's like placing the image in this case like inside of a panel, and the panel has the dimensions of the thing, the LayoutMaster, or the dimensions of the LayoutMaster, right?
Okay.
But now that we're obviously changing these layout properties, we can, as always, start adding layout animations. Do the classic sort of layout animation of a move or vector of 1 relative to position change for a duration of 0.4. These are all random numbers. And we want resize relative to layout change. And now, lo and behold,
well, that's just beautiful.
And this is the foundation of pretty much every example we have that uses layout animation, or using it does any sort of morphing layout, right? So if you like consider this as like a workflow problem, like how am I going to define these different sort of layouts and I'm going to morph between them? That's where it becomes somewhat of a challenge sometimes. You have to be very like conscious of how you're doing your layout. What I typically do is like if we consider these white boxes like sort of temporary layouts or placeholder layouts, right?
Placeholders.
So if we want to do something a little bit more, I guess, what's a good example, right? So let's say we have, instead of these rectangles here, let's just make a panel. And I'll dock that to the top. And this, like, let's say the default layout that we have, and of course these are all going to be wrong now, that's okay. Let's just get rid of most of these guys. I just want to have it while pressed instead. We're going to use change, and we're not going to do anything yet. So what I want to do is have a layout where, also I only have one button here. Rapid prototyping. Bottom. So right, so now I have my button that does nothing, and I have this image that fills the screen.
Yeah.
So what if, say, I had a details view or something where I wanted to be able to show like the title of this picture, but I wanted to like to kind of like scale down the picture when the title is visible or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I would typically do here is establish some sort of like internal like idea of a state, and we have you know, that's another episode really, like talking about states, but just having like a flag that I can use, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess in this case I'll just do a tiny bit of just local JavaScript for this. Script. We need our observable. And module exports is simply going to be like, let's just call it like an is active or something, right? Or is focused is a good one.
Or details view?
I mean, I figured like this is more like the flag we're going to flip to see the two different kinds of layouts, right? So I'm saying like I'm looking at a picture now, and now I'm going to flip this flag to make it like it's well, details is actually fine. Is details view is good, and it's going to be false by default,
of course.
So expose that stuff, and instead of using this while pressed, I suppose. Oh no, well, we can actually mess around with that stuff. I guess I'll just say toggle details view is a function that, which means I need to be able to reference this thing. Let's just stick that up here, like yay. And we're just gonna do is details view value is the negative of itself, right?
That makes a lot of sense.
And then instead of while pressed, we're just gonna have a tapped that calls toggle details view. Boom. And now we have something we can use, right? Currently you're not doing anything with it. So now we have to think, like, what is our actual layout going to look like at the end of this? And we wouldn't say that we're going to have a, there's going to be some text at some point with our actual description. And I don't know what this picture is called, but I guess we'll just say cool picture is the name of this.
But that is a cool picture. I like it a lot.
And if we think, this is like how you can sort of make these layout animations kind of work together, right? Either we do two entire layouts side by side and then tween between them, which might actually be best for this for the purposes of this illustration. So I'm actually going to do that. Hold on.
While you're doing that, I actually have a question that we can cover right after, and it's going to be about dependencies.
Of course.
So
okay, I guess we now have to consider what this dock panel is, right? Like this dock panel establishes like a very sort of complete layout. I want to say the font, I'll just make this bold and, you know, black and huge.
Bold and black and huge.
Is it font size? Yes, sir. 32, and alignment is going to be top, center, like yay. This is, for some reason, the layouts we want to see, but I also want the, what's actually a better way to do this? I'm just gonna take this image right here, put it somewhere else, and, trying to think of what a nice way to put this is. The thing that kind of messes me up here is the idea that I have to create like a temporary layout to work with, right? So if I say the color on my temp panel is going to be white because it's visible, and I'm going to have just an established height on it. So the height is going to be like 200, and it's going to be whatever the width is given to it. I'll just stick this outside of here somewhere. See what that looks like. So here we go. There's our ugly.
Okay,
thing.
But you are inside of a dock panel.
Yes. Like again, it's just on top of everything right now, right? Like I'm doing the docking is not important currently. So the important part there is that I have now a box that I can look at and recognize, right?
Yeah.
So that's our first sort of container. This is going to contain our text. And I'm totally ad-libbing this, by the way, in case no one noticed. And I'm going to maybe put all this stuff in a separate dock panel, come to think of it. The thing is, none of these things I'm doing right now are going to be visible. These are all going to be sort of placeholders that in the future we'll be using to drive our layout, right? So I'll say instead of the height can be fine, and I'll say instead of alignment top, I'll dock it to the top, and I'll dock that to fill just to be explicit. And I'll make that blue so we can see the difference. Boom. Right.
Okay, we see those.
Right. So if I hide this stuff right now, just so we don't actually see it. And this can be placed, honestly, it should be placed somewhere absolute. So if I move this up to the very top here, now it's overlaying everything, right? And we want our button that's going to move between two things. But in this case, I'm actually just going to make it expand the entire thing whenever it's touched. That's fine. So we have our header. I'll just leave all this stuff intact. I don't actually care that much. And I want to have some names for this. So UX name is going to be top box, and this is going to be fill box, just something like that. And then we can have a while true somewhere here that says the isDetailsView.
Yeah, which we data bind to the observable boolean up there.
Yes.
Okay.
So while this thing is true, I want to change image LayoutMaster to be fillbox. And I want to change the text LayoutMaster, which I didn't give a name yet. Where did I put that guy? Did I actually just delete that text because I'm that great?
Yeah, I think you did.
I'm so good. I'm a fantastic human being. Okay, we'll just make another one. So in this case, I mean, let's just temporarily, while we're working here, let's get rid of this stuff. And that stuff is not true yet, so that goes away. Oh boy. What a day. So what I want to do is, like, I want to be here, I want to click this button, and then I want this image to take up the entire screen, and then I want to see a title at the top. That's what I want to do. So this is why I'm sort of establishing this dock panel. Of course, at this point, I don't need to be able to see these things. I can just, you know, get rid of these guys. And it's going to be invisible, it's going to be on top, and I can now use it as my LayoutMaster.
But we know that they are still there even though there are no colors. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, in this case, if I hit TL now, see, now our image goes back to where it went to be.
Resizes to basically fill in the fill box.
Yes. And now I need to do something else with this block up here. And I guess we can make a, what's like no, this is super hacky stuff, but we'll just make a panel that's just 100% wide, and it's going to contain our text, which is some value at this point. Align that to the center. See, it's right here, right?
Yeah, it's right there. But I have a trick question for you.
Hit me.
When you will transition to the details view, how do you think you're going to get back?
Oh, right now I'm just not thinking about that at all. Like, honestly not. I mean, I could reorganize this stuff completely. Like, this button should probably just be moved out of it, like into this own.
Yeah, because it was totally behind the image once it transitioned to the fill box, so you can't hit it again.
Yeah. First of all, just for sanity, let's fix this formatting and let's clean this stuff up, and I'll hurry up, I promise. So this is our dock panel that's overlaid everything with everything we want to see, right? And that's not actually what we want to do. We actually want to do a dock panel containing our entire app. We want our button to be at the bottom of it, because we're always going to see the button.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a panel simply containing our different kinds of layouts. So I'll just call this layouts. And we'll stick our temp guy in here. And we're also going to take this stuff right here. I made a real mess. But that's okay. Get rid of everything. And I'll just underlay that. See that guy. Okay, cool. So now we have the image filling the entire screen, and when I hit this guy, then it toggles the mode, right?
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, well, it's a start. And of course, we're now setting the image LayoutMaster twice here. We need a details box, which I probably, yeah, this image here. So I guess we'll just stick that somewhere. It's filling the entire screen, and I actually want the height in this case to be 0. Just hide it, which I thought would do it, but I can also have to say clip to bounds like that. And then I'll change this name. Let's call it title box. So I'm going to change title box LayoutMaster to be top box. That's going to be instant because we don't have a layout animation in it yet, but that should be it. So we'll just do this guy, like that.
Except that I think the height still stays at 0 because you have
because I've actually specified it explicitly. Yeah, that's true. That's pretty silly of me. I figured it would be slaved to its LayoutMaster.
Explicit properties apparently override whatever the layout animation might want to do.
Ah, okay. Fair enough. In that case, we have to be somewhat interested in... Okay, well, we can just set another temporary sort of... if we do another panel here, let's just call it top box collapsed. Set that height to be 0.
Yeah.
And dock that to the top as well. And then we'll set the default layout master of this image, of this title box, to be top box collapsed. And there we go. So,
well, that's just beautiful. I can see my new gallery application in action.
That was very roundabout. Apologize for that. But I mean, if we're still looking at what we did here, this is the fundamentals of it. Like establishing sort of like a temporary sort of placeholder layout. This is what the layout's going to look like in this state. This is what the layout looks like by default. And then having some sort of flag that changes what the layout master of those elements are.
And again, it's just pretty much an animation between a rest state and an offset state.
Yes.
And there's all there is to it. Now, looking at the placeholder layout, this is where my question comes about the dependencies. Now, normally, also as seen in those more complex examples that we have with the material transition, those exploring example and so on, what we would do is we would want to sort of take out the picture from its scope here,
sure,
and put it somewhere else, higher up in the hierarchy. So when you have a page with a UX class, so how can you refer to something else outside of that UX class?
Well, I suppose a thing we could do real quick here, he says, hoping that it will indeed be quick. I'm just gonna see, because I have the rad faces stuff that me and Chris touched on, and I'm just gonna reuse that real quick. So I need my and I gotta have my rad faces. Give me my faces. Yes. Okay, so I'm just going to reuse this directly up in here, just so now I have some data I can use, right? And I'm going to do a scroll view, same old. Each items should be get people. I don't actually need this stuff, come to think of it. Let's just move that stuff out of here. And people is going to be get people, like that. And for each, I want to create an image where the URL is image. Set that guy up. And what did I screw up here? Probably some JavaScript fun. Do you see anything? Can you spot anything real quick?
Don't you want to export just people? Or is it get people?
Get people is a function that performs like this asynchronous stuff. I just can't get people's count. Oh, yes, I knew it was something obvious. Sorry about that. And that's totally okay. Because I have an each, that should be a stack panel. Jesus. It's Tuesday.
Well, we have seen this before.
Okay, anyway, cool. Now we have the things. Like, what I wanted to do was have it so that when I click on an image, it's going to like become full screen, and like use that as a thing, right? So we'll make and we'll use like a sort of a temporary like placeholder, the same way we did earlier, right? So I'll make a panel. I'll call it UX name would be full screen image, something like that. And since it's just the panel, it's going to always fill the screen, right?
Yeah.
And we're gonna have to make an image class that we can use here. So I'll just use image UX class should be person image. I'm the king of naming things. And we'll just use person image for each image. But now we also want to feed in like a dependency, like what is going to be the layout I'm going to slave myself to, right?
Yeah.
And that's when UX dependency comes in. So we need a panel UX dependency called, what should we call it? Full screen layout, like that.
Yeah, that sounds fine. Well,
Now
that's you know pretty much just an arbitrary name that you can assign to.
it's something I can reference,
Yeah.
just like everything else. So like in this case, I now get this complaint because I'm not feeding that in. So full screen layout in this case has to be full screen image, like that.
So
now we've satisfied the dependency.
Juani is asking if we can move the video preview to the right. It's obscuring part of the code.
Oh, well, that's actually, what if I just move the code right now? Because it's actually a little bit awkward.
Is that fine now?
Yeah, I'll try and move it up like this.
We'll just keep scrolling up and down.
So I'll just keep it like this. That'd be better, right? Anyway, now, cool. We have a person image, and here's what we're gonna do is, like, just to get started with it, I'll just say, while pressed, I want to change this LayoutMaster to be full screen layout, like that. And now while it's pressed, it's trying to slave itself to that layout. But since we don't have a stretch mode, it's now just looking kind of funky, right?
Okay. So can you somehow make it more apparent what is happening?
Yes, of course. First of all, let's get the stretch mode up so it actually fills the layout properly. Uniform to fill is our guy. And now I hit this guy. Okay. That image is now being like made full screen. You see it's still in the background of other images here?
Yeah.
That's another thing that's worthy of, like, it's not actually reparenting it. It's not moving it to that other thing. It's just taking its layout information, right?
Yeah.
So to kind of make that work better, what I typically would do is either kind of manipulate where the layout position, like, I guess we can just move the Z offset for this, which is just like moving the depth of the object you're looking at, right? So I'll just say this Z offset to be like minus, I don't know, 100, some arbitrary value. And that's apparently the wrong direction. There we go.
It should be to the front.
There we go.
Wow. Okay.
So now, I mean, this is horrifying, but I'm just kind of showing that, you know, we're taking these things and we're giving them different layouts.
That's just wonderful. So to recap what you just did, so in the main app hierarchy, we have this panel with the UX name full screen image. Then you are passing it in as a dependency to a UX class. And then inside of that UX class, you can use the dependency name to refer to that panel outside of the component itself.
Yes. So I could conceivably like pick different kinds of layout here for each item based on some data in that item if I wanted to. But the key is, like, you have to, like, when you do dependency like this, your code would not build until that dependency has been fulfilled.
Yeah.
But in this case, like, I just need something like a panel called that I'm going to call full screen layout, so I can reference it here, and then I set it here, just like I would set any property on a class.
And the dependency can be pretty much any other UX element, like panel, dock panel, stack panel, scroll view if you like. So you can pass in any kind of dependencies that you like.
Yes.
Cool.
So I mean, this is not still. This needs a little bit more work. But already now you can see, like, clicking on these things, like, they animated into that. But now, of course, now I'm not saving the Z offset. I can actually use set here. And I don't know why you want to do this. Don't do that. But now at least it's gonna, or I thought that would stay on top. Ah, never mind. Clearly things about this I'm not totally familiar with. But yeah, so.
Well, perhaps bring to front could work as well.
That's actually not a bad idea. Why am I thinking about Z offsets? I overcomplicate things. That's what I do. Yeah, that works beautifully.
Wonderful.
So yeah, I mean, that's not the world's best example, but at least it illustrates like how you would feed in some layout that you would depend on in your triggers like this.
Okay, so I think these are pretty much the building blocks for any layout animation that you could ever want. You can make material transitions of any complexity. Yeah. With just that.
It is like a lot of things that are easy to explain. Like actually applying them will take a little bit of practice. Like especially like keeping track of the different kinds of layout and which element goes where is like it is a little bit of it's a learning experience. But I think just I can't imagine this being any clearer in terms of what's actually happening, right?
Okay.
So fun stuff. And like you said earlier, if you specify a specific height, then that does not get overridden appropriately by the layout animation. So
yeah, but that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, not everything
if you
should be
specify
flexible.
a fixed height, then you could obviously change that height to something else, and then the layout animation would resize your element.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of ways to change these properties. I mean, it is Fuse. So I think for now we're actually running a bit late. We've covered a lot of stuff, slightly, like maybe a little bit clumsy even, but it's fun. Layout animation is a lot of fun to play around with. Like in terms of just getting to a very complicated result with very little code, it's one of the more powerful things we have in Fuse. Remember when we actually got this stuff working the first time, it was sort of like everyone gathered around like this is kind of incredible. So I hope we covered most of the basics here. We also touched on the move animator here as well, and we showed how you use relative values, right? So like 1 relative to the size of the parent and so on. So
yeah. If I could suggest one thing, then that would obviously be to go to the documentation, specifically for the move, resize, scale, and other transforms, and check out for yourself what each of the relative to and relative node as well properties, what they actually do and how they affect how the layout animation will work. There's the position change, layout change, position offset, world position change, and many others. So it's best if you just go and read about them.
And as always, like, look at our examples. Like, they use most of this stuff and in much prettier ways than I just did. So, but yeah, I hope this brings you, like, you know, up to speed and like at least get you to the point where you feel comfortable playing around with it and you know that it's there. So, thanks guys.
Thanks for joining.
I gotta be the old man. Push the button.